Hey, so I'll set a little bit of context. This is actually a presentation that Brad and I did with Evan Staton from Amazon at reInvent. But so it was tailored to an audience that's not necessarily media and broadcast, but the concept and the proof of concept that they did and the work was all in the media and entertainment vertical. So good content for this. So, what can you do with on-demand networking and the AWS cloud? So you could do this with any cloud generically as well, and also with any network. And I think that's an important part to this discussion is like, we're talking about some of the changes, and I'll hit the networking changes in the beginning of what's happened over the last number of years from telecom providers and clouds to make more connections. And then we'll kind of jump through what we actually did with a baseball game and some other stuff. So pretty quickly, we'll go through that part, accomplish what we did, impacts, and then what it can you do. So just really generically, as a telecom industry, have connected to cloud since the beginning of clouds. But we've done it in the traditional way of, like, I get a quote, I get an order, about 45, 60, maybe these guys would tell me months, days, years, whatever. Later, we actually get a connection. And we've done that with Waves, we've done that with Ethernet and IPVPN. So nothing there. And that didn't go. But in the last 2-3 years, there's a bunch of telecom providers and overlay providers that have actually done dynamic networking. And dynamic networking for this audience is pretty relative. You've done it a lot and for a lot of years inside the broadcast and media space with feeds from sports venues and news events and all the rest. But traditionally, we've taken this as an industry now where there's portals, there's APIs. We've already pre-established connectivity to Amazon, to Google, Azure, everywhere, all the cloud providers, a lot of the data centers. And with a couple clicks of a button, you can enable capacity to a cloud provider from your enterprise location. And so what this does is, in this case, we'll show you, we have a sports venue that was also enabled, and we connected those for hours at a time, right? And so it's not a 1-year, 2-year contract, and that's a big part of what's going on in the industry is you can get it like in an hourly basis. And so when you think about this, part of the other conversation that we were trying to drive when we were talking about this is, yes, you can use the public internet, but private networking is also out there. So this kind of wheel of what it matters and why it matters is more of a private opportunity. Like obviously, the internet's connected to all these cloud sites already. It's connected to a lot of the other sites. But the big thing on this slide to go back to is the industry is going to, and cloud-like experience, hourly capacity, light it up, for a few hours, turn it down, pay for what you used. And that's the biggest part probably from a network perspective. So obviously like I said, pretty simple diagram, hosted connection into the venue back to AWS in the end. Couple quick screenshots of just how you get it. I don't know if I go back, but basically AZ location, what bandwidth do you want? Couple clicks, you click and you go into the Amazon side, you say accept, and within a few minutes, you've got the capacity that you ordered from a shared location that we've already pre-established into the cloud to do what we're going to talk about next. I'll hand off to Brad for.
So amazingly, Richard led in pretty well for me. That's actually a shot of the mobile unit Game Creek Encore for the Super Bowl today from last week from that side. But look, sports is the truest on-demand work case that we've got out there. You look at what we do on a regular basis and you tend to watch our content at night or on the weekends. And so from that side, when you look at ROI, when you look at building things out, we're always kind of searching for that ability to do more, but knowing that there's a finite cap on what we have and the ability to do it. And so that's really the goal set that we came across any of these projects with on a regular basis is how do we scale up when we need it and how do we then re-leverage that stuff in other points in time. And so in working with the team at AWS, we kind of looked at that leveraging standpoint and trying to figure out what's the next kind of step for us. But just to kind of give an understanding for those in the room, you can kind of see an overlay of what it takes for us to do a broadcast from that side. I will say that, while the Daytona 500 is a pretty nice number at 390 people on site, and unfortunately sitting behind a sustainability panel is not a real brilliant setup for me here in any way, shape, or form, because we won't even go into the megawatts of power I'm using. But from that, we had well over 1,000 people on site to produce the Super Bowl, just under a month ago from that side. So you can kind of see what's going on as we kind of talk about why we're building this use case. And so in coming through and seeing what was out there, obviously we're a big customer of many of the cloud providers, AWS being probably the lead for us at this point. That, really the goal was, we know these tools are out there, what can be done? And we were talking with our team at Amazon, and they said, hey, well, we think that you can do more, and we think that we're kind of there. And we said, well, then now's the time to really figure out, are we really there from that aspect? And so we lined up a number of vendors that were cloud ready or cloud working already, and then worked with some other partners, and that's honestly when the on-demand side of this came in, is that in talking with Evan at AWS was, we said, well, how are we going to get the connectivity? And honestly, the answer was, well, we already knew how to do it because we do it every day from that side, and that's how sports runs. It's an on-demand, occasional use case basis of moving video and audio, and then became IP over the last 3 to 4 years of doing that stuff. And so we knew that Direct Connect existed from that side, and so we knew we had a way in because we've done a workflow semi-near this one already from that side. But as we were doing it as well, we kind of said, let's not go kind of part of the way or try out what we know will work. Let's go as far into this and as hard into this as humanly possible. And so a couple things that Thomas will point out is that, not only did we have the game and the location at Busch Stadium on a mobile unit that was actually doing the show. So this was a simulcast for us, a test from that side where we had an on-site production, full crew, full everybody there. And what we did was we took our HRP, our home run production resources that we normally use, and we shifted them into this cloud workflow. And then we said, well, let's not put all our operators in the same spot. Let's let them work from home and see how well that goes for us. Because if we're going to break something, let's break it all at once and figure out where the problems are from that bit. And so you can see where the operators were located from that side. And then, as well as we look at this, we pulled in that Lumen network and created a fully diverse path to AWS East from that side. So as we kind of pop through, you can see, and I'll give Thomas a slide and he'll run through some of the gear and the technology behind what was going on.
Great, so they established dual physically diverse 5 gigabit per second paths between the stadium and US East 1 region. Instead of driving a whole truck there, we just came up with a 10 RU rack. It had, there we go, great. It had 18 JPEG XS encoders on board. It had 2 Juniper switches for a red network and a blue network for that diversity. It had BNC IOs. Unfortunately, we had to interface via STI, but no one's ever been infected with a virus over STI. Okay, no problem. We'll change it next time. Also, we had Meinberg PTP clock to give us a PTP for timing, as well as a UPS and PDU. And all fit into a little 10 RU packet. Let's go to the next. I'm not going to spend like a half an hour going over all the details here, but in the short bit about it, JPEG XS into the cloud using Media Connect in order to do SMPTE 2022-7 seamless failover. So if you missed a packet on one path, you'd pick the packet up on the other path. Then going into Grass Valley AMP as a switcher, Simply Live as a replay system. VizRT was here for the complex graphics, and also the Foxbox on Ventus, which puts up the score on the bottom hand. Okay, and let's go next. Okay, this is the exciting part. Can we roll the video?
Hitter with fewer RBIs.
If we bring up the
2 different subjects, though, right?
Okay.
Sure.
The top 4 cameras, top 2 rows, are the actual cameras coming back. And then on the bottom, these are auxiliary feeds, which they brought back for the operators. A shot of the scoreboard, for instance. Any other items they brought back?
Yeah, so obviously, as you can see, these are the camera ISOs themselves that are coming back in. As well on this feed was a program feed from the truck, which you're not seeing in this multi-viewer. Bottom left there, yep. From that side, so that we could kind of time things up and see how things are going. And so, look, obviously the beauty of JPEG XS is the latency from that side. And, as we kind of go through the rest of this, you'll see, how reactive this was, because the operators themselves were actually operating off of the producer and director who were in the truck calling to the local operators in that truck calling their show. And so, as you run through this, we see, what that looks like, because you're hearing things, they're watching things in real time. And then from that perspective, all that video goes into AWS as JPEG XS. It gets turned around as WebRTC to all those home operators from that side. And that's where we kind of, push in. And as well, you'll see here what this is the Amazon version of the broadcast.
Subjects though, right? For sure.
Okay, now we're in a deep. Ready to take two.
Skimming softly on the ground. Grissom a long way to get to it. Unloads quickly.
8, stay with Goldschmidt. Ready, 3. Take 3.
Told you to be
Ready,
back
8.
and run.
Take 8.
So infield base hit.
Ready to replay to green. Pick the green, track green. Roll. Step out to dissolve Y slow. Ready to dissolve X slow.
He's legging it out.
Roll X dissolve fade track. Nice and slow at the tail end of it. Ready to dissolve Y. And roll Y dissolve. When his foot hits the base, freeze it.
Steps are perfect. That's how
Ready to
close it
pick that
was.
to 8. Pick that to 8.
Now for more in the Triple Crown. Kenny, what are your
Open
thoughts?
Kenny. Ready font 2. Add font 2. Stay with him tight.
There's your VizRT graphics at your left and
Ready
the Ven
for
2's
clean.
Foxbox on the right.
Take 4 clean.
And just to be clear, the cameras
Hitter
were
with
coming.
fewer RBIs.
Oh, if we can stop for 1 second.
That's two different subjects though, right?
Maybe we can't. Okay. Okay. The cameras are coming back with 5-to-1 compression. I was actually talking to Brad about this earlier. That's something that Fox Sports is happy about. So as you're thinking about JPEG XS bit rates, I guess for 720p 60 with the audio, that comes out to about 300 megabits per second. The auxiliary feeds were coming back more like 10-to-1 compression, but they like 5-to-1 for their cameras because that's what looks good in JPEG XS.
No, if we're gonna use things, we want to do it at the highest quality level we can, because what we found is the same reason why we've gone to 1080p and 1080p HDR for a lot of our programming, is that input quality matters, and it shows down the line, and it shows dividends even in our transmission systems in the final point at 720p to our affiliates, along with our FS1, FS2, BTN networks as well. And so there's a lot of bonus in that for us, is that the goal is to keep the quality level as high as humanly possible, while balancing out obviously bandwidth and those things as we go forward. The note you'll see here as well is that we'll watch a little bit of the side-by-side. So this is JPEG XS, the broadcast program coming in from the truck, time to then the actual cameras and the internal switcher and all the delay that's built into the slide Thomas showed you of all those cool lines, into what it's happening, and you'll see how close it really is, and it becomes more human reaction than it does actual
Hitter
challenges.
with fewer RBIs. Well, that's two different subjects though, right? For sure. Correct. Skimming softly on the ground. Grissom a long way to get to it. Unloads quickly. And Goldschmidt legs it out. Told you the big guy can run. It's an infield base hit. He hits this and he knows right away he's got a chance. So he puts his head down and he's legging it out and just gets to the front of the bag, which is what you got to do. Hit the front of the bag, not the middle there. Timing steps are perfect. That's how close it was.
Now the other note here is that the announcers
Kenny, what are your thoughts?
were not really even delayed. So what you're seeing is true announcers on the same from the broadcast program. If you're listening to the mix, it's almost exactly dead on for the announcers, because there's little to no delay inside the cloud for audio from that perspective, as we were talking on SEMTA 2110 earlier today and different things from that side.
It's a one-run game.
So really kind of an amazing setup where you see that the fact that these operators are operating from their homes, and we'll show you home setups and things like that as we go forward. But it really does show that in the end, we've proven that this is completely doable inside the cloud.
So everyone asks about latency, latency, latency. Evan actually measured the latency latency from the output of the OB truck all the way back to Tempe, Arizona, and it was about 15 frames. And then we compared that with the cloud path. And again, you can add up all the frames. There's some frames in JPEG XS encoding and decoding, and the SMPTE 2022-7 seamless merge, and there's a couple of frames in some conversion we have in the Grass Valley AMP, and then it comes out, it has to be JPEG XS encoded to get back to Tempe. At the end of the day, the cloud path was about 20 frames, and the direct path was about 15 frames. So it's basically, we're clearly sub-second here. Latency is not a significant problem.
So yeah, so now walking through some of the setups. So this is our technical director. So he actually had a Grass Valley Corona panel in his house tied to the GV amp switcher set. From that side, he has 2 multi-viewers there as well, all running on a little super small PC from that side, and then outputting to those 2 monitors from that side. So all WebRTC based from that side. Look and feel was in essence the same as he's normally used to from that bit. Our audio person decided, as any of you know audio people might do, he put this on his porch at his house at the beach. So have to give him credit for that from that bit. But there are other pieces that were inside the cloud. We moved our normal audio player, the spot-on device, into the cloud, which is a kind of a first manifestation. Our Ventus Foxbox was the same way, was the first application yet of both of those products inside the cloud from that side. So it's obviously driving things forward. I will say that audio is probably the place we had the most challenges, and that there are not a lot of good hardware devices yet that actually talk into the cloud to control the software functions that are there. There are a lot of companies out here, some of them are in the room, that are making that more possible as we go forward. But as we were doing it, it's MIDI controllers talking to some web devices and things like that that aren't necessarily the most fun. But in the end, you couldn't tell the difference in the broadcast. Our replay operator running on a Simply Live system at his home up in just kind of north of New York City from that side. Same look and feel as he has on a normal basis, and is able to be a part of the replay infrastructure. So we had one replay operator operating in the cloud. We then took other multiple replay operators from the truck itself and put that video into the JPEG system and passed it to the TD from that side. So a lot of good work there as well. This was our VizRT op, to be honest. The VizRT op and the Foxbox op would know no different. Their box could have been anywhere, and they were operating beautifully. And to be honest, we actually have a number of devices in the cloud currently operating this way from a graphics standpoint on a regular basis. A number of our daily news shows operate this way on a regular basis. This is the Foxbox operator. To be honest, another setup for us that is becoming something that we're looking very hard at long term, with the ability for them to either drop off NDI to do a convert on the far side, at least initially, and then obviously some other transport methods as well, because these, if you've ever been out on a sports remote, is probably the device that breaks the most often. Really, this test for us, for both Amazon and Lumen as our partners, was amazingly successful from that side. And so, as we continue to kind of move through, it really has been something that, honestly, I thought when we walked into this, if I got a show that kind of looked like television on the air, I'd be really, really happy. And in the end, as we got closer and closer, we realized that we actually had something that, in the end, turned out to be something that I could have put to air and I would have felt really good about it. And so this is really something that we're continuing to drive towards as we look at, a lot of 11 college basketball game Saturdays and things like that, where this on-demand growth is really necessary to what we need to do. And, we continue to expand bandwidth and capabilities inside both the cloud and interconnections from resources and places.
So I think that's pretty much it. Like I said in the beginning, so we can take questions or whatever, but at the end of the day, and we've done it a couple more times since, we kind of kept repeating it at Busch Stadium, then set it up at another venue, did it again. So it's not a one-time thing that we've done. And like I said, this was more about for the audience, the other audience. I think it's targeted, and we've talked about in this space for a long time doing remote production and all the benefits of it. But I think there's probably a lot more, even in the media and entertainment space, where, like I said, cloud capacity, our cloud resources, network capacity can probably, dynamic network capacity can give you an opportunity to change a business. The sustainability thing, it's kind of interesting that we followed that. We talked a lot about this even before we took this out before about, man, this is a great message for getting people off planes, out of hotels, not driving cars, and sitting on their porch. Heck, I'd like to sit on my porch and work all the time. So anyway, that's pretty much it. Thanks for the time. I don't know if there's, yeah.
Yeah. I did want to talk a bit about costs. And generally, when you spin up this kind of infrastructure for a game, you're imagining like 12 hours or so, right? And that 12 hours of the cloud infrastructure, it costs a lot less than sending all of those staff via airplane and hotels, et cetera. So the cost of the cloud part was much less than any potential travel costs. So already there's a savings there as well as a quality of life differential. Yeah. Great. Okay, gentlemen, I think we're ready for questions. Please, we've got Brad here. If you've got questions, please ask him. He's the man who made this all happen. No, sun silence. Okay. Oh, we got one.
Brad, the chart that you had that had all the number of cameras and stuff with the different vents, what do you think that looks like 3 years from now?
I think it looks a little less on site, and we've seen that kind of over time. And we see some of those numbers, they're not necessarily fully representative of where people are. Obviously during the pandemic, we were forced to put a lot of people in other facilities and other places and working collaboratively. And we've kept that model going forward since then. We haven't actually backed off it. We've seen a lot of benefit from it because that reduction in travel and cost and things like that in most cases has been returned to the production. So we've found better ways to use that money and boost the production quality. And the other thing that we found too is that the more often, we have kind of a mix in our crews in the field, in that, a majority of them are travelers and are consistent every week on our shows, but a lot of them are locals. And so it's great to say that you're a local and you work on the NFL show this weekend with us, and in 2 weeks when we come back, you work on it. But the problem is when you come back in 2 weeks, it's a different producer and director. And so you have to learn a new workflow or learn a new way to do things with certain people. And so what we've been able to do with that function is, to be honest, is provide the same locals the work that they were getting, but tie them to a crew every week. So they might be working in Kansas City this week, in Charlotte the next week, in Los Angeles the week after, but they've never left their home in Charlotte, North Carolina. And that's been really beneficial to the productions and making them better and look better. But really, we're not seeing a reduction in staffing out there. We're seeing a realignment of resources.
Do you see where you have this, your primary distribution, your main feed, creating more parallel productions with the same content that would be repurposed for some of the direct-to-consumer applications, because you proved out that cloud works for live professional quality broadcasts. Now it's how do you create more content using those same camera feeds that are targeted maybe at certain players, more of a customized fan experience?
Yeah, and we've done a lot more of it now. And one of the beauties of having all this stuff available, whether it's on the cloud or whether it's linked back to our network centers in New York, Chicago, or LA here, is that you have that capability to do things. And we've seen a lot of that. Our digital team has been doing a lot of that stuff, again, depending upon the property, depending upon our rights to do those things. And it really is, the goal has been for us at Fox is to find something special worth watching or listening to that doesn't necessarily take away from what the real storyline is of the entire broadcast of that event from that side. But no, we've got a lot of great series that use a lot of this content. And to be honest, a lot of it for us is actually on the backside. And the beauty of having all that content back and all those ISOs and all that ability has been to prove out a whole bunch of shows. And racing's one of the big ones for us, of Radioactive, which is a show just about all the in-car radios. And they produce a whole hour show, but they're producing it because they have all of that material is already ready and back for them as the race is going on. The people who are producing it they actually produce it from their home. Our radio editor and our radio mixer actually work from their home every week in Charlotte, so they never leave. So they're there to go into the facility, produce the show later on that week that turns around for Wednesday. So it's that stuff's been able to give us a lot more ability to produce really high-level content, which is the goal.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thomas, on the EC2 instances that you were running in the cloud, what size were those?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I can get back to you on that.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
So, how would you compare your this remote production to what I will define as your distant second cousins at Foxtel. Their remote production that they do down in Melbourne, where they bring all the cameras back. Now, admittedly, you were doing this from home, but still it's about not having people in the stadiums and the venues. Do you see differences or commonalities between the two?
There's a ton of commonality, honestly, between what they've done down there at Foxtel and the Andrews Hub with the group at NEP. And to be honest, a lot of this was built off of the same kind of workflow we have both here in Charlotte and Chicago and in LA here for our home run productions, and that we were able to take that kind of goal of workflow of moving the cameras back and putting them with the best producers and directors who don't need to get on a plane. And one of the sports we started with on this was college basketball. And the thing that we found was that in many cases you'd have a crew, not only producers and directors, but also behind the scenes technical staff, A1s, TDs, those people that they were doing 1 or 2 shows for us in a market that was, in one of my best examples is Washington, D.C. We did 10 basketball games at Georgetown University, in one of our seasons, and we had 6 different directors, 4 different producers in those 10 games, not to mention we had 7 different A1s. So to teach all those people to work together, some of those people did like 3 basketball games that season for us, to teach them to look, make all those things happen and make it look consistent when they hadn't seen the team or done those things was, they were perfectly fine broadcasts. I'm not gonna say they were bad, they weren't. But when we put it into our Charlotte Network Center and produced all 10 games there and had the same A1 for 9 games and had the same producer director for every game, those broadcasts were just much better to watch because they knew the team, they knew the players, they knew what was going on. And so that's been very beneficial to us because you take that ability out and then the ability to give them the ability to do that game on Wednesday in Georgetown, Thursday at Marquette, and not have to fly them and hope that they're gonna make it there. And the amount of travel stress I don't have anymore, especially in college basketball when we do 300 games a year, is much reduced now that I know that we do 190 of them in Charlotte or Los Angeles.
Thank you.
Brad, thank you for sharing the example. It's awesome body of work. A question, something that we've been wrestling with when it comes to talking about live sports and having people working from their home environment, and it's true of entertainment as well, but one of the things we're struggling with is what about reliability in terms of power and connectivity? Any particular steps that you took in this particular test to shore up my home internet that's it doesn't have quite the same bulletproof reliability that it might have at the facility?
No, and the interesting case was that each one of the remote operators, to a certain extent, there were 3 people on cable modems, and to be honest, these aren't people that necessarily had 1 gig 35s or something like that. They had kind of normal-ish cable modems. We didn't tell anybody to change their specs. The TD actually lives in a place with Google Fiber, so he had a 1 gig fiber connection in his house. And so did I believe that the replay operator had a pretty robust FiOS connection in his house. But to be honest, no, we didn't, because we knew what the risk was there. We did actually put in UPSs for the second set of games that we did, just because reboot times, things like that, just to make sure that we didn't have any challenges there. And I will say that the replay operator's dog did eat the Ethernet cable during one of the broadcasts. So that did happen. I'm not sure if he ate it or maybe he just pulled it out of the side. It's something. Needless to say, he disappeared for like a quarter of an inning. So there is a lot of challenge, obviously, in that's out there. We deal with it on a regular basis. Our NASCAR coverage has a lot of people working from home and not from our vault facility in Los Angeles or some other facilities we have throughout the U.S. To do that, which are on obviously more protected power, better internet circuits, things like that from that side. But in many cases, the data rates we were seeing for these operators on WebRTC and the control setup that existed was that, we're talking about needing, 10 megs down and less than a meg up. And so, we've also been doing a lot of experimentation with, cradle point routers and different, cellular-based backed up systems in order to do that kind of stuff as well, too, to see how, what we do on a more robust case basis. And obviously, look, we're never going to put everybody at home because there's a lot of risk in that. But the more that we see going forward, the more leverage we can get on the best people, the better off we are.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm glad to know we kind of are dealing with the same problems. I think there's a new resolution that can go into a discrepancy field now that the dog ate my graphic.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.